And now stand by for adventure.
3, 2, 1.
In the exciting story of Scratch and his feathered friend. Interplanetary space investigator Colonel Bleep and his deputies, Squeak and Scratch, roared with atomic speed past the black planet Pluto, over and under the green planets Neptune and Uranus, through the glowing yellow rings of Saturn, and then screeched to a halt, directly over the 12th moon of Jupiter. Somewhere below, on this mysterious satellite, lurked the evil Dr. Destructo, master criminal of outer space. This time, Bleep meant to track him down for sure. To Scratch, the caveman, landing here was like stepping back into the dim past of his childhood, because this forgotten world was inhabited by the same prehistoric monsters which roamed the earth when Scratch was just a boy, back in the days of the dinosaurs. Anxiously, Bleep searched the horizon with his Butomic visoscanner and quickly spotted Destructo's hideaway, high on a rocky cliff beyond. At twilight, they would attack and capture the villain in his lair. Meanwhile, Squeak settled down on a cozy bed of soft green ferns to rest until 0 hour. And Scratch, remembering his childhood, went happily off in search of a tasty prehistoric egg, a luscious treat he had not enjoyed for several thousand years. The caveman was at home here, and no beast, regardless of size, ferociousness, or cunning, could frighten him or keep him from finding that egg. And then Scratch saw it, the biggest, roundest, most delicious egg there ever was. But when Scratch reached to pick up his prize, it suddenly began to shake and rattle and roll round and round. The caveman dove under a feather to hide just as the great egg shattered. And there stood a strange bird, a super bird, far larger than Scratch himself. Thinking the top of Scratch's head was another egg, the bird tried to peck it open too. And when Scratch leaped up, the bird felt sure this was his newly hatched brother, and he began to hug the caveman joyfully. Meanwhile, as twilight gathered, Bleep and Squeak silently closed in on the entrance to Dr. Destructo's secret cave. A strange glow from within meant the mad scientist was busy at work, and his capture looked easy, if only they could be quiet enough to surprise him. But just at that moment, Squeak accidentally squeaked, alerting the huge vampire bat which stood guard at the mouth of the cave. The evil creature lunged towards them. At the same time, Bleep aimed a blast of Butomic energy at the beast. But too late, he realized that the long trip to Jupiter's 12th moon had completely discharged his Butomic storage batteries. Now, the great bat swooped upward, clutching the helpless pair. But Scratch, riding his prehistoric superbird, had also seen the bat, and in an instant, the huge bird, with the caveman at the controls, dived down towards the monster for a fight to the finish. Then a head-on crash sent the bat spinning down, straight towards the entrance of Destructo's hideout, while Bleep and Squeak floated to safety on 2 great feathers. Yes, Scratch and Superbird had saved the day, but there was no time now to check on the fate of Destructo, because Superbird was waiting to fly them back to the planet Futura, where a new supply of Butomic energy and another exciting assignment would be waiting for Colonel Bleep of the Interplanetary Space Command. And now stand by for adventure.
3, 2, 1.
In the exciting story of Scratch and the Sea Serpent. Scratch was headed for trouble. On the shore of the lagoon near the center of the island, he had found what appeared to be the entrance to a great cave. Scratch peeked into the dark interior, squeezed between the huge white rocks at the entrance, tumbled inside, and then down he went. Down, down, down into a tunnel of darkness. Too late. Scratch realized that this wasn't a cave at all, but the inside of a gigantic sea serpent. And the great white rocks he had squeezed through were the monster's teeth gleaming in the sun. And now those giant jaws of the sea serpent had closed, trapping our caveman friend, maybe forever. Of course, little Squeak, busy in his library, and Colonel Bleep in his laboratory were unaware that Scratch was in trouble. Bleep, for some time, had been experimenting with a secret formula for changing Futomic lightning bolts into solid rods stronger than steel. That very morning, he had discovered the final missing ingredient, which Bleep called frigid plutonium 505. By creating a Futomic lightning bolt, then quickly freezing it with frigid plutonium, the bolt became a solid rod as light as a feather, yet stronger than steel. That same morning, little Squeak was in the library of his new dream home, dusting the many shelves filled with wonderful magic books. These books were magic because the pictures in them actually moved. For instance, here's a page from Treasure Island. And Jack and the Beanstalk. And here's Squeak's favorite book, The Adventures of Pinocchio, the story of the little wooden puppet who had all kinds of exciting adventures and even became a real live boy. It wasn't until about 20 minutes after Scratch disappeared down the throat of the sea serpent that Bleep and Squeak discovered he was missing. Through the Futomic radar scanner, Bleep could see every spot on 00 Island, but Scratch was nowhere to be found. Then Bleep saw a movement in the lagoon. It was the sea monster. And when Bleep switched on the X-ray vision attachment, he plainly saw that the caveman was trapped in the stomach of that serpent. In an instant, Bleep and Squeak streaked to the water's edge. With a flash, Bleep made 2 Futomic lightning bolts, sprayed them with frigid plutonium 505, and using these strong rods as stilts, they waded into the sea to catch the serpent by surprise. As Squeak pinched the monster's nose, its mouth opened and Bleep jammed the stilts between those great jaws. And before Squeak could squeak, the Colonel had dashed inside the serpent to rescue their old friend Scratch. Then Bleep grabbed the beast by the tail and with super Futomic strength threw him completely out of this world. So once again, Bleep, Squeak, and Scratch are reunited. And you can just bet that Scratch will not step into any more caves without testing first to be sure that it is just a cave. And now, stand by for adventure.
3, 2, 1.
In the exciting story of Shadows of Suspicion. Bleep, Squeak, and Scratch spent many happy days at their home base on Earth, 00 Island. The Colonel kept busy with new experiments in his lab. Scratch spent many happy hours digging away in the garden, and Squeak played with his favorite toy, a little wooden puppet. Squeak loved this toy, perhaps because he himself was made of choice lumber. A block of delicate white pine for his head, and a board of sturdy oak for his body. Yes, little Squeak was really a wooden puppet, but few could have guessed that he was anything other than a real and very natural little boy. For he certainly was full of mischief like most real little boys, as his friends knew too well. Bleep still recalls the shock of dashing about for almost an hour, dodging what he believed to be flashing meteorites.
only to discover later that little Squeak had slipped a handful of fireflies into the Colonel's helmet, just for fun. Another time, Bleep awoke from a sound sleep to find himself covered with green and yellow spots, a sure sign of Futurian frog pox. But little Squeak knew that the colorful dots on the spaceman's helmet were just dabs of paint, for the puppet had put them there himself, just for fun. But it was poor Scratch, the good-natured caveman who suffered most from this puppet trickery. More than once, his trusty wooden club had been nailed to the floor. And who can recall how many times a scrumptious coconut pie had a hidden balloon inside, just waiting for poor Scratch's knife or fork. Squeak's favorite prank, however, was making shadow pictures on the wall by holding his fingers in front of a bright candle. He would create the shadow of a wolf, then signal for help, and Scratch would dash to the rescue, only to find the puppet rocking with laughter at his joke. The caveman had been fooled by Squeak's shadow pictures of a giant crab, a monstrous crocodile, and a ferocious ostrich. At last, Scratch had vowed never to be tricked again. Then, one day, it happened. Bleep had blasted off for a closer look at a storm cloud approaching the island. Scratch was inside his cave, carving a new wooden club, and Squeak was fishing in the brook by the waterfall. At the first raindrop, Squeak dashed for the nearby shelter of Scratch's cave. Now, no one had noticed that a giant tropical spider had just spun its huge web across the cave entrance, and poor Squeak ran smack into this deadly trap. Scratch looked towards the doorway to see the puppet snared in the giant web, but as he watched, the stormy sky outside made his poor struggling friend look like just another of Squeak's own shadow tricks, and Scratch returned to his club carving, determined not to be fooled again, and never dreaming that his little friend was really in trouble this time. Poor Squeak shook with terror as the giant spider appeared, ready to devour him. It would be all over in a flash. And it was, but the flash was from a powerful bolt of Bleep's photomic energy. Yes, the Colonel had returned just in time to save the puppet. And so a very frightened Squeak, now safe in the arms of his friends, promised faithfully never to call for help unless he was in honest-to-goodness real trouble. For now he knows that a foolish trick can sometimes cost a life.
And now, stand by for adventure.
3, 2, 1.
In the exciting story of Squeak and the terrible Termite. In his cave on 00 Island, Scratch awoke each morning just as the first sunbeam peeked through. He would yawn, then reach for his trusty wooden club to be sure it was ready for the day's adventures. Colonel Bleep, in his laboratory, was up early, just in time to silence that noisy bird in the wooden clock before it could finish its morning call. Because in his little dream house, Squeak would still be sound asleep in his cozy bed. This morning, however, things began in a very different way. When Scratch yawned and reached for his wooden club, it was missing. Only a few crumbs of sawdust remained. When Bleep got up to silence the cuckoo clock, something was very wrong indeed. Only the metal springs, gears, and numerals were left. Every wooden part of that clock had vanished. Even the cuckoo. Bleep and Scratch rushed to awaken Squeak, but the little puppet's bed was empty, and Squeak himself was nowhere to be found. The only clue was a trail of unusual footprints, which Bleep recognized immediately. Only yesterday in his lab, the Colonel had seen those very same footprints, only much smaller in size. Following the tracks, he had discovered a tiny wood-eating insect called a termite. But Bleep was amazed to find that this particular termite had traces of interplanetary wood dust on its wings. Something strange was going on. Somehow, by some strange power, a tiny termite had grown overnight into a giant monster. There was no doubt. A wood-eating monster of tremendous size was on the loose. Poor Squeak, the little wooden puppet, had been captured by a giant termite. A terrible termite. The Colonel sped into action. Using futomic energy, he quickly made for Scratch a brand new club. Not of wood, but of solid lead, one of the heaviest, most malleable metals commonly used by man. Thus armed, Bleep and Scratch hurriedly followed the footprints to rescue their little friend. Suddenly, they were upon him. There was the great insect sprinkling salt on the poor wooden puppet, who lay bound on a huge platter. This was a time for quick thinking and fast action. With caveman strength, Scratch molded his heavy but malleable metal club into a statue that looked exactly like Squeak. And as the termite turned to put away the salt, Scratch quickly substituted the metal statue for the real puppet. And at the same time, Bleep charged the statue with a bolt of futomic lightning. Then the terrible termite turned, and in one hungry gulp, swallowed the charged statue. With a howl of pain, the monster leaped into the sea to cool off. But the weight of that heavy metal statue pulled him down, 50 fathoms under. So once again, peace was restored to 00 Island. And while Scratch fashioned a new wooden club, and Colonel Bleep prepared the cuckoo clock, little Squeak snoozed soundly in his cozy little bed, tired from his exciting adventure and completely unaware that even greater danger lay ahead. And now, stand by for adventure.
3, 2, 1.
In the exciting story of Test of Friendship.
Ordinarily, Squeak the puppet and Scratch the caveman were the very best of friends. It was Scratch who had carved Squeak's favorite toy, a wonderful wooden hobby horse. And Squeak was forever surprising his caveman buddy with a scrumptious coconut pie. Together, as space deputies in Colonel Bleep's scooter squadron, they shared many thrilling adventures as they fought to maintain right and justice throughout the vast galaxies of the universe. Yes, Squeak and Scratch were more than just good friends. They were almost like brothers. Until today, like a bolt from the blue, the Daily Mail rocket arrived with a special delivery message from the Futurian High Command. A message which threatened to shatter forever this wonderful friendship. To Colonel Bleep, Commander, 00 Island. Squeak and Scratch are tied for award as Space Deputy of the Year. You must choose the winner by dawn tomorrow. Space Deputy of the Year? This is important, for the one cadet chosen each year wins his own personal merit flag to prove that he is the finest space deputy of them all. There is no friendship now. Squeak knows if it wasn't for Scratch, the winner's flag would be his. And the caveman knows only Squeak stands in the way of his victory. This is the showdown. There can be only one winner, and it's gonna be me. For the rest of the day, neither the puppet nor the caveman have one single word to say to one another. That night, little Squeak lay awake, recalling his many adventures of the past year. There was that time on Jupiter's 12th moon when he and Bleep were captured by Dr. Destructo's giant vampire bat. But wait, it was Scratch and his mighty super bird who saved them from a terrible fate. Oh, well, what about the time he was frozen in solid ice by the terrible ice demons of Saturn? Why, again, it was Scratch who came to the rescue with an army of marching penguins. And when Black Patch forced him to walk the plank, it was Scratch who routed the pirate band with a pilgrim blunderbuss. Maybe Scratch is the one who deserves to win the merit flag after all. Meanwhile, in his darkened cave, Scratch is thinking of his year's adventures. Could he ever forget the time he was swallowed alive by a giant sea serpent? Say, come to think of it, it was little Squeak who was first to the rescue. And that day on the moon when the caveman slipped and fell from Destructo's giant observation tower. Who saved him then? Why, his puppet pal. And who could have shown more courage and valor than little Squeak when he faced the powerful Black Knight alone on the field of battle? It was hard to believe, but perhaps Squeak should be chosen Space Deputy of the Year. At dawn the next morning, Bleep found 2 letters under his door. One from Squeak and one from Scratch. The puppet had written, Scratch deserves to win. And the caveman had written, Squeak deserves to win. It's time to announce the winner. Squeak and Scratch snap to attention. Then the space cadets blink in surprise. For instead of a name on the flag of honor, there is only a huge letter S. But does this initial S stand for Squeak or Scratch? No one knows, not even Colonel Bleep. For how could anyone choose just one winner from 2 such brave and unselfish cadets? And so it was that the caveman and the puppet shared the winner's flag. And once again, Squeak and Scratch were more than just good friends. They were almost like brothers.